Welcome back to the 6.8 liter garage. We're going to try to clear up some mess or confusion that I may have created last week when I was trying to explain why sometimes when you draw something in Inkscape and then export it either through SheetCam or directly as a DXF into your ArcDroid, the final product isn't the same dimensions as you intended it to be when you were drawing it. So last week I did a video and tried to show what I thought was causing the problem, and I don't know, a further confusion. I didn't prove anything. So Laptop Guy's back and he wants to show you what he thinks the problem is. So let's go see what Laptop Guy says. Hey everyone, Laptop Guy here. Today we're going to try to clear up some confusion from the last video where somebody brought the laptop out to the garage and tried to draw some stuff. And we had some confusion because everything we cut was smaller than the desired size by the Kerf. So I think we can explain that and fix that right here. So let's go in, graphics, Inkscape, new drawing. I'm going to set my document properties, US letter, that sets it to inches. Set this to inches. Okay, so in the interest of saving metal or fitting more cuts onto a piece of scrap, instead of doing a 1 inch by 6 inch cut, I'm going to do a 3 inch by ½ inch. So we're going to draw another rectangle. And let's see, stroke style. That needs to be inches. And I want that 0.035, which is roughly what I've determined the Kerf, my plasma cutter on these thinner metals. That's about right. Okay, so this object is not quite the right size. So I said I was going to do ½ inch tall by 3 inches wide. And what we were doing last video is we were measuring this object. I set the size again. ½ inch tall by 3 inches wide. Okay, so that the same thing we did last time. ½ inch tall, 3 inches wide. That's the object we want to cut out. But the problem is the Kerf is within those dimensions, right? So that's ½ inch minus the Kerf, and 3 inches minus the Kerf. So let's save this one just so we have an example of what we were doing last time, and we'll call this one stroke measured. Okay, and let's do it the way I think we need to do it to fix this problem. So let's turn on the fill and turn off the stroke. So now the fill represents the piece that's remaining, the piece that we're cutting out after the torch turns off. That's what should be left. So you can see here that's 2.964 by 0.464. So I think that's roughly what we were seeing because it was smaller than the dimensions that we desired to cut out. So let's change this back to ½ inch by 3 inches. So this is the piece I want to cut out, which means I want the torch right and outside of that, right? So this is the piece we want. So let's turn this, I'm going to turn the fill off. I'm going to turn the stroke back on. Stroke style is close to that. Well, I like 0.35. Okay, so now when we look at the dimensions, the piece we wanted to cut out is ½ inch by 3 inches, but the dimensions we see with the stroke turned on and the fill turned off is 0.535, so it's added the Kerf in, by 3.035. Once again, added the Kerf in. And that's what we want to do because the Kerf's a real thing. It's going to get cut out. And not to confuse things even further, but so you ask yourself, why is it only 5.35 when it's going to get cut on both sides? Why isn't it 0.570? That's because only half of the Kerf is cut. Now this is getting complicated, but only half of the Kerf is cut within those dimensions. Remember, this is drawing the path, the stroke or the path that the torch is going to follow. Half of the torch Kerf is on one side of that and half is on the other side. So we really only need the full dimension of 535. We don't need 570. So 535, half of the torch is inside the line all the way around, and that gives us our 0.35. So anyway, that's my theory. So I'm going to save this one. Oh, I screwed up. Okay, let me file, document properties, size to content, and we'll save this one as file, save as fill measured, because we measured the fill and then we saved it with the stroke turned back on. So I'll save that one, and then I'll go back and reproduce what we did wrong a second ago. So I can the reason I want to do this is because stroke paint off, or actually I do want stroke paint on, fill off. So the reason I want to do this is because the zero will be, the zero will be way down here somewhere instead of being right at the corner of the object we're going to cut, which makes it easier once you get it to the ArcDroid. So if I say file, document properties, size to content, and our object still says 3 by 5 because we measured with the stroke as well as the fill. So I'm going to save this one again, and I'm going to save it right over the top of stroke measured because that's what it is. The stroke was measured, and I just want to reset the 0. Replace it. Okay, so we're done with Inkscape. I'm going to open up SheetCam and bring it in, and we'll see some interesting stuff in here. So let's import drawing, and let's do stroke measured. Open. So this is the drawing that included the stroke when it was measured, right? And you can see this line is 3 inches, but we're shy of 3 inches. And if you look from here to here is actually 1 inch, so you can tell we're actually shy of ½ an inch. So this is going to be too small, but this is what we were doing in the last video. So we'll do it again. So this is our cut, and I'm going to run the post processor. I'm going to save it to the same place, stroke measured.g code, save, and then let's do a new one. File, new job. I don't want to save it. Now let's just close it. Open it up again. Sometimes it's easier that way. Okay, so we're going to import our second drawing. Import drawing. This one will be fill measured. Remember, we're just this one we measured just the part that should be left after the torch turns off. So you can see now it is ½ an inch tall by 3 inches wide. So this is what we wanted all along. So I'll set the tool, and we'll run the G code, run the post processor. We should get fill measure.g code. And there we go. So let's take this stuff out and cut it and see what happens. Hopefully I know what I'm talking about. I don't want to say that. And hopefully Garage Guy will be less confused. Alright, Laptop Guy out. Okay, so I've loaded up Laptop Guy's first drawing, which was remember the stroke measured rectangle. So that means the stroke is included in the dimensions that you set in Inkscape, which is the wrong way to go. According to Laptop Guy, that was our problem last video. But just to verify, might as well do it again this week. So I've got it all set up and ready to go. I'm going to turn on the torch and we're going to run it. There's one. Now let's load the second drawing. I can make everybody sick by moving the camera. So load. This one's the fill measured. Remember, we measured the fill, but we measured the fill, but then we turned the stroke back on the second drawing. So this is again called fill measured. So we measured the part we're trying to cut out, then we turned the stroke back on, and let's see what happens when we cut this one. Stop. Helps if you set 0 again. And try this one. Okay, and this is the part where I show you, see, I was exactly right, or laptop guy was exactly right, and here's the proof. But that's not exactly what's going to happen. So this is the one we measured the stroke and included that in our dimensions. And it's 2.94335. 2.9435. So it's smaller than we would want by 435, so 570, 565, and this one's 2.9825, so it's just a hair small. So where we measured the fill, let me do that again. No, it's just a hair small. 845, so 2.9845, 845 thousandths. So that means we're 155 thousandths off on this one. So the theory was that the one measure where we measured the fill and had the stroke on the outside of the fill, that will fix our problem. But I think what the real problem is my measurement for kerf is wrong. So I need to increase the size of the kerf over the 35 thousandths I'm using now. So I'm going to do that, and I'll come right back here, but I'm not going to put you through the anguish of watching me draw everything or watching laptop guy draw everything. I'm going to go redo the drawings and cut these out, and then we'll see what those look like. Okay, so a few cuts later we got some results. So things to remember about the kerf. The kerf can change based on the material, the voltage. I mean, the thicker the material, the tip. You know, a thicker tip versus a thinner tip. Air pressure. I mean, everything has a very has an effect on kerf. But under the current settings, this is an 18 gauge piece of metal. And 0.9, I think it's a 0.9 tip. This is what we found. So the original setting, I was using a kerf of 0.035, and based on laptop guys, I'm going to stick to the fill stuff because I think we proved what laptop guy was saying. You want to measure the fill and then turn the fill off and turn the stroke on. The stroke will be a wider, it'll be a measurement outside of larger than what you're trying to cut. We're trying to cut a 1/2 inch by 3 inches. So with my kerf set at 350 or 0.035, I was short by 270 thousandths. So I changed my kerf to from 350, so from 0.035 to 0.066, which was too far. Now I'm 385 thousandths over. And then I changed it to 0.050. So my kerf now is set at 0.050. And we've got almost exactly 3 inches. I guess it just points out that two things. One, when you're measuring your object, make sure you're measuring with the stroke off and the fill on. And then that'll get you as close as you can get. And then the next factor is kerf. How accurate is your kerf? I've got a bad feeling that now that I got my kerf set at 0.050, it's going to be wrong if I put a new tip in. So things are that, sensitive as to the outcome, especially on this thin metal. So so that's my findings. So make sure when you're measuring or setting the object size in Inkscape that you use with the fill on, the stroke off, so you're not measuring the kerf essentially. And then make sure your kerf adjustment is accurate. If it's something that's important and not artistic, you might want to use a new nozzle and a new tip just to make sure, and then know what the setting is for new ones. I think my setting is still going to be 0.035 with a fresh tip and 16 gauge. So I think that's what this shows. So again, set your size with the fill on and the stroke off in Inkscape. I'm sure Fusion does. None of this makes any sense for Fusion. And then know your kerf based on the various things that affect kerf: pressure, voltage, current, the tip, how clean the tip is, what kind of tip you're using, the material you're using. You gotta learn those things for your machine. So okay guys, that's that. No big fancy interesting project this week. Just a follow up on what I did last week, which was kind of inconclusive, although it did point to the kerf. I wish I can say in Inkscape that go to the settings menu and turn on the ArcDroid setting, but that's not how this works. So the fact is you have to account for kerf. What you draw in Inkscape, that's what's going to get cut out, but you have to think about what you're doing as far as your measurement and where you want the cut to happen. So in our case, we're doing these little rectangles. We want the cut on the outside. We need to set the dimension of the object we're cutting out with the fill on, because the fill is the part you're cutting out. The stroke is essentially the kerf. So you turn off the stroke, measure your object, set its size, then you can turn the fill back off, turn the stroke back on, and carry out your business. The other factor is the size of the kerf. There are too many things that affect that. I mean, a lot of things. The freshness of your consumables, the tips on your torch in general, just how it works. How dry your air is, how the air pressure, the thickness of the metal you're using, the speed that you're moving the torch. All these things factor in with kerf. And since you're still going to have to clean up after the kerf, you might, if the size is critical, I might actually make it oversized and then grind down to it for something that like a bracket where that is possible, acceptable. But anyway, so it's not that you can't use Inkscape to do these things. And when you're cutting with plasma, you can't just cut it's not a laser cutter, and it's not a punch or something. You're not going to just be able to cut it out and then paint it and use it. There's going to be some work cleaning things up. So but I think you can cut the size you want to cut. You just have to think about where the kerf's going to fall when you're cutting, and make sure that you set the size so that the cut happens outside of the stuff you care about. At least that's what I'm finding. That's what I'm remembering. I did a video about a year ago determining the kerf on my machine, and I think I used the same piece of metal, the scrap that I just used, to cut it out. Maybe not, but I know it was 18 gauge. Anyway, that's how I determined my 0350 for my kerf slash line thickness in Inkscape. So you have the fill and the stroke. So you set the stroke to your kerf thickness, and that's why I've been using the 0350 for since then anyway, for over a year. And it just hasn't mattered on anything I've done. So until I had a commenter ask me, did the number sign that I put on the front of the house, did it come out to the dimensions I set? And I was like, I don't know, let me go measure it. Well, it didn't, and it was a kerf. So because I set the dimensions with the stroke on, so it was off by the kerf. And your kerf setting is important, so you're gonna have to learn about your machine, and maybe just figure out the kerf for the tip size and fresh tip. And then if you're doing something that's size critical, make sure you put some new consumables on. So anyway, that's what I got for you today. If you want to support the channel, like and subscribe and share, like this says here. And you can always go to the store and pick up some merch. I got a green shirt now. I've got 2 of them. They actually fulfilled my order, so I have faith that they're fulfilling orders now. So if you want to pick up one of these shirts, they're available on the store. There's a QR code if you want to go check that out. Anyway, I appreciate you watching, and thanks for your support.